Welcome to the show. I'm Chris Smiley. Glad to be back in studio. Really enjoyed the program from Dr. Kamrani. Sajia, thank you again for allowing me to come speak to the people. So today, I wanted to get into some real talk. I think I was trying before my first few shows to kind of figure out what it's like to make a TV show, how it's supposed to be. But I'm trying to think about what can I share to make the most impact.
Can you change Dr. Kamrani's?
Oh yeah, we still have technical issue here. Let's go ahead and switch this one. So hold on just a second while we fix this up here. We're live on Facebook and Jadu Television. All right, we're just getting a couple of technical issues fixed. Hold on one second with this. Anyway, welcome to the show. I'm Chris Smiley. If you haven't caught any of my previous shows, I'm a documentary filmmaker, activist. You can check out my website, chrissmileymedia.com. I just came out with a short film called Disneyland of War. I think this is a film everyone needs to see. We expose the U.S. military recruitment of young children here in America, and also the propaganda of trying to get the kids and the public to believe that war and violence and killing are fun and glorious. So something you definitely want to try to check out. We'll also be coming out with my feature film on the war in Afghanistan sometime this year. So today, like I was saying, I wanted to try to get into some real down-to-earth talk. I wanted to try to turn this TV show into something really worthwhile and really use this platform to discuss what I've learned, the most important things I've learned, and what I can really share with you to help make things better. So, I've been getting a lot of questions about, what should we do? What's going to happen with things like the Trump presidency? So I'm going to answer some of these concerns. I'm going to answer some of these real pressing questions that I know that we all have, and I know that I have a very educated audience out here that is really anxious to hear some answers. So I'm going to try to provide what I can from my experiences. When I first started working, when I dedicated my life to work in public interest, to work for social justice, I decided to work in education initially. Education is the foundation of a society. It's the most important aspect that we can have as a civilization. But I knew that something was wrong when I was going through the educational system as a kid. I knew that there wasn't something right. So much time was wasted. So many things didn't make sense. I felt like it wasn't until I really reached the university level and I took certain classes, I took philosophy, that I really felt like that's where I was really being taught. I was really being taught how to think properly. I was exposed to real teaching. I was exposed to real logic where, not just a memorization of facts and dates where I'm able to just associate ideas, but really questioning deeply into things, developing my critical thought. And this was something that was really, enlightening to me, something that really struck me as, wow, this is what education is supposed to really be like. And I felt like, that's what we need to see more of. In today's school, you can, for example, if you're in a science class, you could be able to associate an electron with being A positive, B negative, or C neutral. You can associate an electron being negative, but do we really get to understand what that means? Do we really get in depth in talking about how this association came to be, what that really means, what it means for a particle to be this, and what all the sorts of inner workings of the sciences? And it relates to any subject. History, we can bring up certain historical facts, that someone might say that Vietnam was propelled off of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, but what was the Vietnam War really about? Why did it happen? Millions of people have died from that war and other wars. Why did this really happen? Can people really get into the debate about that? And unfortunately, our educational system, it was so flawed. And that's something that I realized, that there's two fundamental flaws in our society. We're not taught how to properly think and what to think, the correct things, the truth. These two fundamental flaws, our history books, our media outlets do not properly convey reality. And this is where we're at right now. This is a real critical problem. In the past, people were ruled over by force. You had kingdoms and kings that ruled over with their armies and forced people to act a certain way. But today, what we have is a control and manipulation of information. It's a war over our minds. This is how, we're at. This is why terrible things are allowed to happen. I mean, nobody held a gun to someone's head and made them vote for Trump or made them vote for Hillary. People willingly chose to vote for certain candidates. So education is the answer. Education is how to solve all of the problems that we see. People have willingly voted for their own oppressors over time because their minds have been manipulated, people's information has been controlled. So this is so critical. Education is essentially our salvation. So if we can teach people how to reason, teach them the truth, we can have peace. We can have peace in Afghanistan. We can have peace in the United States. So, right now we have a society that's about cutthroat competition and manipulation. This is how you can become successful. But, what if we lived in a community where human enlightenment was the prime directive, where we really work together to achieve the greater good for all of us? I mean, this is something that we can actually accomplish. I really believe that this is something that humanity is capable of, but it's going to start with a change of our education. Now, I don't work in public education for a reason. It was impossible, nearly impossible, to create any sort of change. I mean, just the smallest of changes from, the real lower level to the higher level, any sort of change was met with extreme resistance. The structure that exists is so controlled and so defined, it's almost impossible to do anything without completely scrapping the system and starting over, much like our political system, where things are just so hard to change. But we have the technology, we have the power to educate, we have the power to educate for political change, which can solve education. This is where I think the answer is. I don't work in education because I think that there are this power structure at the top, and it's a top-heavy structure that influences every aspect of our lives. And until we deal with this greater political structure, I don't think there will be any changes on any of the sort of things that we do, whether it be in education, environmentalism. Nothing will be changed until this greater political structure is challenged. We have this country of ours, the United States, that is so structured to fit this mold, to serve the oligarchy, a ruling elite class. We need major political change. We need a political revolution. And this is something that people are calling for. But what they're doing, the certain actions people are taking, they think is towards political revolution. They think that voting for Trump is a political revolution, but in reality this is not the case, and we're going to talk about that. So, why do we need this great political change? Well, we have all these laws and policies at the top, as I was starting to get into, that affect every little thing we do. I mean, from the big trade deals that crush small businesses. If you want to open up a small business, how are you supposed to compete with these multinational conglomerates that can make the same products that you do for half the price because they use cheap labor, slave labor overseas in other countries? And these companies have created a monopolization of the markets because they're able to use certain exploitations. How is anyone supposed to compete in this sort of atmosphere? How are any sort of changes supposed to be made when competition is just crushed? A lot of my friends, my young friends coming out of college, how can they expect a livable wage in the same structure where someone at China will do the work for like 1/15 the cost? So many of these companies are based in America or run through our system. America is the key. This is the country that we have to focus our energy on. This is why I spend a lot of my time learning about the political structure, learning about what's happening in America, because this country holds the key to everything. We have the biggest military in the world. We have the most multinational corporations with the most money. So if you want peace in Afghanistan, if you want peace in Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, it starts right here. America is the interventionist state that is influencing so much of the world. So it's really important for us to focus in on America, because I really believe it's the key to solving so many problems across the world. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let's get right into American politics. Donald Trump was just elected. People are scared, and some are hopeful. Myself, I personally don't expect anything different other than business as usual in America. The key point is both of our major parties, the Democrats and Republicans, are owned and controlled by the same interests. The Democrats and Republicans have carried out the same policies of perpetual war, imperialism, big money support, Wall Street support, giant banks, centralized power, and when you think about it, this makes sense. Just imagine yourself. You're an elite businessman. You have $1 billion oil company. You want to be successful. So how are you going to succeed? You're going to be active in the political process. You're going to use your billions of dollars to finance campaigns, to influence elections. All right? And when it comes to the elections themselves, are you really going to bet on just one side to win? Are you really going to put all your money into the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Why? When you have all this money, you would bet both sides. You would hedge. You would ensure that you would be successful and victorious either way. So that's what we have. We have a business party with two separate wings, the Democrats and Republicans, but they're really essentially one party. The nuances and the certain different things that you see coming out of them don't make a fundamental difference when it comes to critical policy that affects everything. Let me play a quick clip from Noam Chomsky. Noam is a well-respected author, academic, someone who I disagree with very rarely. So let's listen to something that he has to say.
Book writers like Bernard Lewis say what went wrong, that in fact there might be a clash of civilizations between an Islamic culture and a Western Judeo-Christian culture. They resent us. There's enormous amounts of hatred, and it goes back in history because of resentment.
Yes, there's hatred against us. Why? In 1958, the U.S. government faced, we know from internal records, 3 major crises in the world. North Africa, Middle East, and Indonesia, all with oil-producing states, all Islamic states. President Eisenhower, in internal discussion, observed to his staff, that I'm quoting it now, there's a campaign of hatred against us in the Middle East, not by governments, but by the people. The National Security Council discussed that question and said yes, and the reason is there's a perception in that region that the United States supports status quo governments which prevent democracy and development, and that we do it because of our interest in Near East oil. Furthermore, it's difficult to counter that perception because it's correct, and furthermore, it ought to be correct. We ought to be supporting brutal and corrupt governments which prevent democracy and development because we want to control Middle East oil. And it's true that leads to a campaign of hatred against us. Now, until Bernard Lewis tells us that, and that's only one piece of a long story, we know that he's just a vulgar propagandist, not a scholar. So yes, as long as we are supporting harsh, brutal governments, blocking democracy and development because of our interest in controlling the oil resources of the region, there will be a campaign of hatred against us.
The live show, I can.
So that was Noam Chomsky. If you guys have any comments or questions, we're streaming live on Facebook under Sajid Kamrani's page. You can ask any sort of questions. I have it right here with me to check out. So Noam Chomsky, if you're looking to get some enlightenment or education, I mean, he's written some of the most important pieces I've ever read, books that really shed light, and as you can see, a pretty charismatic guy back in the day that can really give you the straight answers. So as he was saying, we ought to be supporting dictators if we want to have these certain policies carried out, so it should be no surprise that this is the result we have. So what's really important to discuss is, this facade that the Democratic Party has. I spend a lot more of my time discussing the Democratic Party because I think it's far more dangerous in this sense that they have this mask of being a liberal party, a party of peace, defender of the poor and minorities here in America. And it's simply not true. It is not true. Both of these parties claim to represent certain subsets of the population, a great majority of the population. The Republicans sometimes claim to represent, poor white people in the Midwest. And this is simply not true. When you look at the policies that are carried out continuously by both parties, they don't represent the interests of the regular people, the working class people. They represent elite business interests. So I spend time criticizing the Democrats far more because the Republicans are much more blatant in their support for war and inequality. To me, it's too easy to dismiss what they're saying. It's much more of a concern that this Democratic Party is pulling in a lot of people who are interested in social justice, a lot of the minorities in this country. They're really pulling a lot of them into the Democratic Party under a false narrative. Furthermore, I don't think that the Democratic Party is something that can be reformed. I think this past election, a lot of people were excited about Bernie Sanders, but if you really think about it, why would either party let anyone into the top? Why would either party let anyone in that was going to change what they're fundamentally about and what they fundamentally support and what they're structured in from top to bottom in every single office across the country in their complete political structure? Why would they let anybody in that was going to make a real change to what they actually believe in? I don't think the Democratic Party can be saved. I don't think this political system can be saved as is. I think that a real political reform, revolution, however you want to call it, needs to happen. Let's listen to a clip real quick from Dr. Cornel West, someone who's also very dynamic and informative and a great speaker and intellectual. So let's see what he has to say here.
I'm not convinced that the Democratic Party can be reformed. I think it still has a kind of allegiance to a neoliberal orientation. It still has an allegiance to Wall Street. The very victory of Nancy Pelosi is a sign that neoliberalism is still hegemonic in the party. I hope that Keith Ellison is able to present a challenge to it. But my hunch is,
if he makes it as head of the Democratic National Committee.
But my hunch is the Democratic Party has simply run out of gas. I mean, this was a party that couldn't even publicly oppose TPP when we debated that in the platform committee. And that's just one small example. Couldn't vote to stop fracking and so on. So that it's still so tied to big money.
Even though Hillary Clinton had changed her position because of the pressure of Bernie Sanders on TPP.
Exactly. And right there in the debates, they got the word from the White House. We didn't want to embarrass the president. Embarrass the president? What about the poor and working people who are dealing with the suffering? Is that less important than embarrassing the president? And they were very clear about that. And I pushed and pushed and pushed. Here's somebody that can't even talk about Israeli occupation, honestly. The president uses the language in 2009. They can't use it in the platform. Why? Because they tied to the lobby. They're tied to APEC. So that when you have those kinds of restraints on you, these albatrosses around your neck, how are you going to be a party for the people? How are you going to be a party for working people, poor people? How are you going to be a party for those brothers and sisters in Yemen who are dealing with U.S.-supported troops and bombs killing them, mediated with the Saudi Arabian government? How are you going to deal with Palestinians dealing with Israeli occupation? How are you going to deal with Africans, expansion of AFRICOM and so forth? There has to be some integrity and moral consistency. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party just strikes me as not being able to meet that challenge.
So as Dr. Cornel West, I also encourage you to check out some of his writings and clips on YouTube. Very powerful speaker and a man who's really true to his word and what he believes in. Let's see, we're getting a phone call. Maybe not. So, as Dr. Cornel West was speaking of, that he doesn't believe the Democratic Party can be reformed. I mean, he sat in on more recent, was it a panel? I forget what it was called, the sort of committee meeting that they have, and some of the most basic and fundamental things that you would think that a liberal party, a peaceful party would be excited about changing. They couldn't even admit the most simplest of things, that they won't even acknowledge some things like the things regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So let's look a little bit deeper into this, because I think this is a really important point of exposing the Democratic Party for not being true to what they represent. Bill Clinton, he's always been a president that was almost revered until recently. I think he kind of got a hit in public opinion. But he was always kind of seen as a cool guy, I think, after his term in presidency. But Afghanistan TV? Hello? You're on Afghanistan TV.
Hey?
Yes, sir. You're on Afghanistan TV. Do you have a question?
Yes, I want to say just, I listen Chris talking, but I want to talk a little slowly.
Slow down. Yeah. Will do, sir. I know I have a lot of information I'm trying to get out in this short time period I have. I'll try to slow down for you guys, and we'll go over some of the topics. Thank you for your call, sir. Afghanistan TV.
Hello, Chris.
Yes, you're live on Afghanistan TV.
How are you, my dear?
Good. Thank you for calling in.
You're doing a great job. I love your show. I just want to ask you that how do you compare Obama with Trump? Thank you very much.
Okay. Great question. Yeah, so I was just about to get into Bill Clinton, but let's go ahead. Let's talk about Obama. I don't understand anyone that still believes that Obama was true to the words that he spoke to get him elected. Obama's carried out the same policies as George W. Bush, same policies that happened over time. He escalated the war in Afghanistan. He expanded the war on terror to nations like Syria, Yemen, the bombing campaigns. I mean, how many hundreds of thousands of people have died under Obama's orders? It's just very frustrating. But I understand that a lot of people are not being fed the right information. They're not being given the right information, and that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Why it's so important for each one of us to try to provide others with the truth, and I'm going to talk about how we can do that. So Obama versus Trump, I don't see a huge difference. Like I said, we've seen the same policies carried out over time. The same trade agreements are being championed by these parties. The same wars are being carried out. The same Wall Street elites are being placed into positions of high power as advisors and as cabinet members. I mean, there's no reason for us to expect anything different. The most important thing, if you can gain from this show today, is that both parties in America are essentially of the same whole. Okay, so Obama. It was so disturbing to think back. I was a little bit younger and I didn't really understand the process, but Obama was really changed this country into one of hope, and I saw people crying when he was elected, and to see the horrible things that he's continued to carry out when these people had so much hope in what he was supposed to do, it's truly disturbing. The wars that he's reigned over, completely horrific things that Obama has done. So I was gonna mention just some things that Bill Clinton has done, because I think Clinton kind of gets a pass on a lot of things. A lot of people don't know some of the little things he did, because he wasn't in these huge overt wars that were highly publicized. But in the 90s, he imposed sanctions on Iraq that could be considered terrorism. I mean, these sanctions targeted the civilian population. What the sanctions did was restrict things like the supply of medicine into Iraq, essential vital goods that were needed. It wasn't the government that was going to be affected by this. It wasn't Saddam that was going to be hurt by this. This was the general population that wasn't going to be able to access medicines and things that they need to live. And I saw some really horrible things in a great documentary by John Pilger that talked about this, if you want to watch that. And let's look at this clip. This clip is really disturbing. I think some of you have probably seen this quote from Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State under Bill Clinton. Let's watch this clip.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And You know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it.
So that was from Madeleine Albright. I mean, just absolutely disturbing that she thinks the deaths of hundreds of thousands of children and civilians was worth what? This is not how policy is supposed to be carried out. This is not how governments are supposed to act. You know, so this is a trend through time. I mean, you can just look at any sort of historical event to really gain perspective on this. I mean, Vietnam, are there any people that still doubt that Vietnam was unjustified? The Vietnam intervention, maybe not the highest point of escalation, but the intervention started under Eisenhower. It spanned 5 presidencies, Democrats and Republicans. It was a horrific war, one of the most bloody wars that America has been involved in. Let's listen to a really great clip from Muhammad Ali, who was a very public figure at the time, very outspoken critic, and I think a really great clip I want to play for you guys.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother, some darker people, some poor hungry people in the mud for big powerful America, and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. What, I'm going to shoot them for what? How can I go shoot them? Them little poor little black people, little babies and children and women. How can I shoot them poor people? That would just take me to jail.
Ali more than held his own against students who had a far better formal education than he.
I'm saying you talking about me about some draft, and all of you white boys are breaking your neck to get to Switzerland and Canada and London. I'm not going to help nobody get something my Negroes don't have. If I'm going to die, I'll die now, right here fighting you. If I'm going to die, you my enemy. My enemy is the white people, not Viet Congs or Chinese or Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
That was Muhammad Ali speaking out about the war in Vietnam, and I think there's a lot of parallels to today, especially what this gentleman was asking me about President Obama. You know, Obama was this hope for minorities in America, for black Americans, and he really betrayed their trust and their belief, carried out the same policies of the prison industrial complex that hurts black communities, poor communities tremendously. Barack Obama does not care about minorities in this country. That's just a fact. And we can look at a number of different things that he's done and supported. Barack Obama does not care. He does not care. I'm also getting some of your questions. I just want to mention them. Somebody was asking my thoughts about what really happened on 9/11. Was it a false flag? You know, I know that there are a lot of people that do believe that, but I haven't today. I currently haven't seen anything up until this point that would make me believe that, and I don't really think that our government would need to create a false flag operation like 9/11, because we've gotten away with things over the years that didn't need such a horrific event like that. I mean, the American public is easily controlled. When you look at the fact that 90% of U.S. media is owned by 6 companies, that was as of 2011. 90% of the major media, of all U.S. media, is owned by 6 companies, and I think that's getting smaller every day as the mergers are happening. So the control of information is something that is really critical. And back to my point, you know, the Democrats are taking people away from fighting for real justice. And what I'm afraid of with this Trump presidency is that it will re-energize the Democratic Party, that people will come running back in because the Republicans are much more crude in their rhetoric and their public speaking. You know, they're more out there about what they do. The Democrats give us the same things, they give us the same wars, but they give it to us a lot easier. They give it to us a lot softer. They're very somber about decisions like that, where the Republicans tend, when they speak, they're much more aggressive in their tone of voice, but it's just talk. The policies are the same. So, you know, what kind of political system is right? What kind of political change do we need? You know, I'm not I'm not the person to answer that. I don't think any one person should answer that. That's something that should be decided by everyone, by the people in the United States. But to get to that point to where we can even challenge it and have a discussion, there has to be this advancement of education, advancement of understanding of what is really happening. Let's again go to a clip from Noam Chomsky that will kind of really illustrate this point. Let me pull this up.
Tell me, what state does function according to what you call the minimal levels of honesty? Is there a state?
None.
None.
States are power centers. The only thing that imposes constraints on them is either outside force or their own populations. The United States, for example, is far more civilized than it was 40 years ago. Let's just take that. This March happened to be the 40th anniversary of the public announcement by the Kennedy administration that the U.S. Air Force is bombing South Vietnam. No U.S. president today, or for the last 20 years, could conceivably do what Kennedy could do with total impunity 40 years ago. And the reason is because there was massive popular protest. It also spawned the contemporary civil rights movement, the feminist movement, the environmental movements, and all sorts of other things, and it imposed important constraints on straight violence. In fact, that's how we got rid of slavery. That's how we got rid of feudalism.
What will the state look like at the end?
At the end, I think states ought to dissolve, because I think they're illegitimate structures, but that's a long time.
That's it.
But
it is the end of the nation state that you foresee in the vision.
I don't foresee anything. What I'm saying is that as long as people, ordinary people, are able to free themselves from the doctrinal controls imposed on them by their self-appointed betters and mentors, as long as they're able to do this, they'll continue to be able to struggle for peace and justice and freedom and limitations on violence and constraints on power, as they've been doing for hundreds of years, and I don't see any end to that. The immediate problem is to free ourselves from the shackles imposed very consciously by the kind of people you're talking about, who don't want the facts to be known, and for very good reasons, because if people know the facts, they're not going to tolerate them. So therefore you have to prevent them from knowing. You have to indoctrinate them. You have to tell them stories about how we're really good guys, and if we use violence, it must be for the general good because we represent the course of history. Yeah, that's the job of propagandists for power and violence. And it's the task of populations to free themselves from those kinds of controls and domination.
So that was Noam Chomsky again. So what can we do? What do we need to do? Again, education is the key, but it's education in this different sort of way, not through public education. Like I said, I've worked in the public education system. It's under this complete political structure, so it follows these same sort of mold, and nothing's going to be able to be changed. Nothing's going to be able to be structured in a way where people are being educated for, public good. But the reason why I work in film and media is because this is, a real invaluable asset that we have in modern times to be able to use. So we all need to utilize social media. We have seen the power it has in political revolutions as of late and political influence. So I encourage all of you to get on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even Tumblr, to share your thoughts, but not just to speak and communicate with people that have the similar ideas that you do. I want to encourage dialogue with your friends, family members, people online that don't have the same understanding or ideas, because that's who we're trying to reach. We're trying to reach people that aren't as educated and have no fault of their own. I've advanced over the course of the years in my understanding of the political atmosphere and how things really work. There's no shame in not being as informed. It's meant to be that way. The way our society is set up, we're not meant to be informed and educated. So there's really no shame in being able to change your mind and change your opinions. It has to happen. So I encourage all of you to create more social media accounts. Help your older family members create these accounts as well. If they don't know how to get on Facebook, teach them how to get on Facebook. Teach them how to share information. Independent media, like we have here on Afghanistan TV, is something that's just one small piece of this entire work that we need to do. So, what you can take away from my show and from what I've learned is that the key is here in the United States. America is the key to solving the world. And if there's a revolution in America, we can influence the entire world, because America has so many resources, it has so much money, it has so much power and people here, that if we actually had an America that was motivated by public interest and helping others, and that was what our country was built upon, we could solve all of the world's problems. So I'm going to spend a lot of time, during my shows talking about American politics, and it's not because I want to neglect politics that are happening in Afghanistan, but as I've mentioned and discussed in some of my other shows, that America's meddling in the political affairs of Afghanistan, and we're not going to be able to solve the problems of Afghanistan until America withdraws their soldiers, withdraws their CIA assets, their intervention strategy. So that's something I hope that you can take away. And let me go ahead and check here, see if we have any questions coming in on Facebook. I know people are still asking me about 9/11, but like I said, about Bill Clinton, that he starved millions. Right, so throughout the course of history, we've seen president after president, political administration after administration, enacting the same policies. Let me share something else with you. When I was doing my work in public education, I worked at the Florida State Department of Education. They would not listen to the smallest of changes. So I decided to run for a public office as a county school board seat. And what you see is even in these small elections, they're very representative of the larger elections, where the election is controlled by interest. It's controlled by money. There's this already structure set up between the two varying sides of conservative versus liberal, even on these small scale elections. And it's very hard for independence or independent thought to make its way into these sorts of elections. So I don't think that this current political structure of the United States can be saved. I think there needs to be a complete reform of the system, the laws, the policies. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of debate about what sort of system we need. As Noam Chomsky said, the problem with state power is it breeds control and violence, and there's, he advocates for things like an anarcho-communism form of government where the power is leveled across. That debate can happen, and there's not one person that should say what will happen, but if we can all agree that what we currently have right now in the United States and in many countries across the world is just not going to result in any sort of positive outcomes. So let me play this other clip for you in discussing what I had mentioned about the media and why it's important for independent media. I think this clip is pretty enlightening about why we can't depend and we can't trust on the major media outlets, and it's up to us to get out there and create our own independent media. I have friends that have their own YouTube shows and channels. There's very few independent outlets out there that can be relied upon, and let me show you this clip here as a really good example of why that is.
Okay, let's look at one of the other key examples which you've looked at too, which would appear to go against your idea, which is the Watergate.
Watergate is a perfect example. We've discussed it at length in our book, in fact, and elsewhere. It's a perfect example of the way the press was subordinated to power.
But this brought down the president.
Let me give you just a minute. Let's take a look. What happened there, here it's kind of interesting because you can't do experiments in history, but here history was kind enough to set one up for us. The Watergate exposures happened to take place at exactly the same time as another set of exposures, namely the exposures of COINTELPRO.
Oh, sorry, you have to explain that.
It's interesting that I have to explain it because it's vastly more significant than Watergate. That already makes my point. COINTELPRO was a program of subversion carried out not by a couple of petty crooks, but by the National Political Police, the FBI, under 4 administrations. It began in the late Eisenhower administration, ran up till...
This is aimed at the Socialist Workers' Party of America.
The Socialist Workers' Party was one tiny fragment of it. It began by the time it got through, I won't run through the whole story, it was aimed at the entire New Left, at the women's movement, at the whole black movement. It was extremely broad. Its actions went as far as political assassination. Now, what's the difference between the two? Very clear. In Watergate, Richard Nixon went after half of U.S. private power, namely the Democratic Party, and power can defend itself. So therefore, that's a scandal. He didn't do anything. Nothing happened. Look, I was on Nixon's enemies list. I didn't even know. Nothing ever happened.
Nonetheless, you wouldn't say it was an insignificant event.
No, it was a case where half of U.S. power defended itself against a person who had obviously stepped out of line. That's so, and the fact that the press thought that was important shows that they think powerful people ought to be able to defend themselves. Now, whether there was a question of principle involved happens to be easily checked in this case. One tiny part of the COINTELPRO program was itself far more significant in terms of principle than all of Watergate. And if you look at the whole program, I mean, it's not even a discussion. But you have to ask me what COINTELPRO is. You know what Watergate is. There couldn't be a more dramatic example of the subordination of the educated opinion to power here in England as well as in the United States.
So it was Noam Chomsky again, giving us some real important information and perspective. He was discussing Watergate versus COINTELPRO, and that was Watergate story was a major story in the United States media, but COINTELPRO was not. And as he was saying, that COINTELPRO was an operation of the FBI, the United States government, to subvert social justice movements, the women's movement, black rights movement. I mean, it's pretty evident that we can't trust the major media outlets. We can't trust our own government to do the right thing when they're actively going out there to suppress people's rights movements. So, you know, it's up to us to really stand up for what's right. I mean, if you're not aware of the absolute horrors that are being conducted, the information's there. It's there. It might not be shown, but it's out there. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying constantly from the political decisions of a few people. You know, this is something that I felt personally. I think that, you know, it took me losing one of my good friends in the war in Afghanistan, you know, to really feel the impact of some of the political policies that our leaders are making. And I don't want anyone else to have to feel what I felt or what many other families have felt. I mean, there's been millions of people killed in the Middle East, Southeast Asia from United States imperial wars, and I can't even imagine, you know, how like I can't even wrap my head around that, the horror that some people feel a million times over. Like, it's just unreal. I mean, so, you know, we need to get active. We need to do something about this, because I don't want these sorts of things to continue to happen. I don't want other people to experience this. I don't want to see more lives lost because of the greedy actions of a few people. I do believe there's a lot of good in humanity, that we can make a change for this. And I don't think that what happens around the world is a real characterization of humanity as a whole. I think it's a select few group of people that are making us all look bad, making the human race look like a disgrace, because the sorts of policies and actions that we're having, just utterly unbelievable. All right. If you have any other last questions, feel free to ask on Facebook. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up today's show. We're running out of time. For next week, we're having a shift in schedule. My show will be on Saturday, 1 o'clock after Amiri's show. And we're going to have a lot of our shows shifted around to the weekend scheduling due to some construction at our studio. So stay tuned for an update on some of the changes in scheduling. But my show you can catch Saturday, 1 p.m. That's 1 p.m. Pacific time after Mr. Amiri's show. So I thank you all for tuning in. I know I spoke a little fast on my show today, but I really wanted to just get everything out there that I feel like that I can really offer you some of the most important points that I've come across. We can discuss these things further over the next few weeks. We can discuss how to make some things happen in the United States, which I told you is the key, the real key to having peace in this entire planet, honestly. And so we can talk about what's happening, how we can get involved, certain specific things we can do, And I hope that the show can be something very positive and successful, and help organizing a lot of you out there that are just like me, looking for someone else that's also doing the same sorts of things, someone else that wants to make something happen. So for Afghanistan TV, I'm Chris Smiley. Thank you, Sajia, so much. Dr. Kamrani. You can catch a repeat of our shows on Jadu, and as always, we'll be live on Facebook every week. And we'll see you next time.